The first time I saw him, I thought he was just a grumpy old man. You know the type? Ancient-looking, mean-faced, hunch-shouldered, living in a little house that stuck out among all the modern homes in the area. It looked like it might crumble if the wind blew too hard. A rotting eyesore with peeling paint, broken windows patched with duct tape, and a porch overtaken by weeds. Why did the neighbors put up with it? Probably because it was here long before any of the other houses in the area. The last remnant of a time long past. His place sat at the end of my new route home from school. I just started at North Middle School and was just outside the radius of bus coverage. Yeah, the house was weird, but it wasn't the house that made my skin crawl. I spotted him in the upstairs window one afternoon, his pale, leathery face pressed against the glass, watching me. I froze mid-step. His eyes, small and sharp, didn't blink, didn't flinch. Just bored into me with a strange, hateful stare. My chest tightened. I quickened my pace, pretending I hadn't seen him, but the image of his face burned in my mind. The next day he was there again. Same window, same unblinking stare. My stomach churned as I walked past, avoiding his gaze. My friends teased me when I told them about it, laughing about old man creeper, and saying he was probably harmless. But it didn't seem that way to me. After a month of this, things began to escalate. One Friday, I noticed him standing on the porch as I walked by. He wasn't hiding behind a grimy window anymore. This time, he stood out in the open, staring at me with those same venomous eyes, his face twisted into a sneer. I hurried past, clutching my backpack like it could protect me. When I glanced back, he hadn't moved an inch, but his eyes followed me down the street. I talked to my parents about it, but they weren't very concerned. My dad had seen the old man once and thought he looked too frail and feeble to be a threat to anyone. He said that very old people often behave strangely and there was nothing really meant by it. My parents' assurances were not really comforting. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the encounter in my mind, wondering what I'd done to deserve such hate. Did I remind him of someone? Maybe he was mistaking me for someone else. The questions festered in my mind, feeding a growing sense of unease. The following Monday, I felt his presence before I even saw him. As I rounded the corner to his street, a cold shiver ran down my spine and my steps faltered. I looked up and there he was, lurking behind the corner of his fence. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching. Then his whole body began to tremble with rage, the veins on the side of his head and neck bulging. I ran past his house in a panic. By the time I got home, I was frantic, tears streaming down my face. My mother was so alarmed at how upset I was that she called the police. They came over and took a report but said they couldn't do anything. It wasn't against the law to give people mean looks, especially when they do it from their own property. They advised me to take a different route home if I found it that upsetting. I took their advice and started taking a different way to school and back. It added 15 minutes to my walk, but better that than seeing that creepy old man every day. Several weeks later, I had a nightmare of the creepy old man peering through my window. I woke up in a sweat, certain I'd heard something outside. A faint scratching sound like nails dragging across glass. I stayed frozen in bed for a long time, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. I finally got up and looked outside, but the front yard was deserted. It was the next semester and English class just ended. As I made my way to my next class, I saw a commotion at the front of the school. The police were there and I couldn't believe it. They had the creepy old man in custody. I later found out he had come onto the school grounds muttering to himself and wandering into the different classrooms, as if he was looking for someone. I felt sick. I was sure I knew who he was looking for. After the police took him away, my parents told me that I would not need to worry, that the creepy old man was going to be institutionalized for his own benefit. I was relieved that I wouldn't be seeing him again. His house sat empty after that and I started taking my normal route to school again. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every step I took past that house felt like walking on eggshells, like something unseen was waiting just beyond the broken windows. As the weeks went on, the feeling wore off and eventually I started walking by the old house without a moment's thought. Several years went by, and that dump of a house where the creepy old man lived turned into an abandoned ruin. Around Halloween, my friends and I were bored and trying to think up something scary to do. The ideas naturally turned to the ruined shack of the creepy old man. "Let's spend the night there," my friend Jamie offered, to which I replied a big, "Hell no." But with a lot of coaxing, I finally agreed to a compromise. We would sneak into the abandoned house in the daytime and check out where the creepy old man used to live. The three of us, Jamie, Jan, and I, walked slowly by the abandoned ruin, checking to see if anyone was looking. Then, when all was clear, we made a dash to the secluded backyard, concealed by the overgrown bushes that surrounded most of the place. With a little searching, we found a window that had been broken out long ago. Not a single piece of glass remained. We took turns boosting each other through the window into the dusty twilight of the interior. The place had the stench of mold and rotting wood. The roof had been leaking for years, and the carpet seemed to be half dissolved into a semi-solid mess all over the floor. The place was as bad as you would expect for a crazy old hermit. Trash spewed about, lots of old newspapers, some old tin cans, and a lot of dust and mouse droppings. The graffiti on the walls bore witness to the fact that we were far from the first trespassers here, and our inspection of the drawers and cabinets confirmed that if there ever had been anything worth taking as a souvenir, it had been ransacked long ago. We were about to leave when I noticed the end of one of the warped floorboards looked like it had something red behind it. I stooped down and pulled at the floorboard to find what was underneath. A book that was hidden under the floorboards. What a find! We were all abuzz with excitement. Was it the creepy old man's diary? We couldn't contain ourselves. We immediately opened the book and started flipping through the pages. At first I thought it was some notebook from a geometry class, different compound triangular shapes and scribbled notes. But as I leafed further through it, the contents seemed more occult, with drawings of visceral human and animal anatomy. The further I scanned, the more unwholesome the drawings became. I got a sudden feeling that I was holding something disgusting. I dropped the book and wiped my hands on some mildewed curtains that still hung in tatters on one of the windows. We all got out of there as quick as we could. When I got home, I washed my hands for 10 minutes straight. I regretted ever going in that place and still do to this day. One night, about a week later, my parents had gone for a weekend trip to see relatives and I was alone. I woke to the sound of soft, deliberate footsteps. They weren't outside this time. They were inside. The footsteps were slow and shuffling, moving from one end of the house to the other. I stayed frozen in bed, barely daring to breathe. Then came the whispering. It started as a faint rustle like leaves blowing against the window. But soon I could make out words. A low, raspy voice repeating my name. Over and over. My stomach twisted into knots. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling, and dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, but I couldn't explain what was happening. Someone's in my house, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. The whisper stopped abruptly and the house fell silent. The police found no sign of a break-in. The locks were intact, the windows closed. No one was there. Things have only gotten worse since then. My hands still feel dirty all the time. I wash them 20 times a day, so much that they look like lobster claws. I keep hearing footsteps and whispers every night. My parents sent me to therapy and I was prescribed medications to help, but it doesn't. Why did I have to go into that house and touch that book? I feel I'm cursed now. And I don't know what to do about it. And I'm running out of time.